by welcoming all of you to today's master class on crisis communications. And today what we are focusing on is the general manager and communicator relationship, because I think in the world of rural electric cooperatives that it is just absolutely vital that we have good relationships. And I've seen all kinds of different relationships between the managers and the communicators. So we'll talk about some of those today. And hopefully you'll get some insight, and there will be time for you each to ask questions. There will be opportunities for you to share some thoughts on your own relationship that you have between your general manager. My name is Jaret Brew. I have been practicing crisis communication since 1994. And prior to that, I spent from 1979 to 1994 as a journalist. So a lot of my crisis communications knowledge was really built off of me showing up at a scene of a disaster and knowing what my wants and needs were as a reporter and how hard it was for me to get the information that I needed. And so when I left TV, actually while I was in TV, I started thinking somebody needs to start doing training classes on these topics, because people are taking 2 and 3 hours before they get us information after the flashpoint of the crisis. So I started my own strategy of initially media training, but then from media training, it blossomed into people going, well, can you write all of this down into a plan for us? So then I put together a package where organizations can get their crisis communications plan, their vulnerability assessment, and pre-written news releases all in one. So that's my relationship with most of the cooperatives I work with, is they have that bundle of information from me. And then in 2020, I launched Situation Hub. Situation Hub is a sponsor of the program today. I'm not going to give you a sales pitch. I'll just hope that you look at situationhub.com, but it's essentially automation for a lot of what we have in paper. It now automates a lot of things, including notifying people, as well as automatically writing a news release for you in any sort of event you have. Our special guests today are Ron Barnes, APR. And for those of you who are in communications, you know that APR means he's an accredited public relations practitioner with the Public Relations Society of America, which is probably something that not a lot of other general managers have. And we're going to talk we'll talk in a minute about Ron's path, because back in 1995 it is, Ron, I think you joined Coast Electric, and at the time you were Vice President of Communications, PR, and Member Services. And then in 2017, Ron became the general manager. His board chose him as the general manager at that time. And he brought on board our other guest, Melissa Russo, who is now the Vice President of Communications. So there are special guests today as we look at that relationships. So our objective today is, this is not a sales pitch for Situation Hub. I'm really just trying to use Situation Hub as a vehicle for us all to get together once a month, share best practices, have some higher level thinking, ask some questions that you would have normally asked in the hallways, or asked at a breakout session, or asked after a keynote at a conference. But every conference is virtually canceled, or it's gone virtual. So people aren't getting the interaction. And I thought there was a need for us to have that interaction. And my hope is over the years that we can just establish a really cool learning community within Situation Hub, especially at the blog portion of the Situation Hub, whether you're a subscriber or not. I just want everybody to be able to have access to best practices. So Ron and Melissa, we should note, are just emerging from Hurricane Zeta 1 week ago. The eye of the storm went right over your building in Kiln, Mississippi. So Coast Electric is in Kiln and Picayune and Waveland, Mississippi. So Ron, why don't you and Melissa start by giving us an update on how your system did, the type of damage you had, and where the system stands now. And then from there, you can transition into what were some of those communications challenges that you had before, during, and after the storm.
All right. Well, first of all, Jared, it's a real honor and privilege to be with you today. And, I don't care if you're the CEO or not, you always love, if you're a communicator, to talk about communication related issues. We did have Hurricane Zeta make landfall first in Louisiana, and then we're right next to Louisiana and Mississippi, and we kind of caught that worst side, right side of the storm. It was a fast moving storm, which was actually a blessing because it got in and got out pretty quickly, but it left in its wake just a tremendous amount of damage that we spent the last 7 days getting all of our meters turned back hot again, all of our members restored to power. Just to give you a perspective, in Hancock County, where we are here in the Kill, we had 997 either broken or damaged poles. In Harrison County, which is the county to our east that we serve, an additional 714 damaged or broken poles. And you know, it takes sometimes as much as 3 hours to change a pole out. So it was definitely a mess. We cut over 2,000 trees off our lines over the last 7 days.
How many?
2,000.
Wow.
Yeah, 2,000 trees. We actually ended up having about 700 folks in here working for us over the last week. Our sister co-op to our east, Singing River, they had about the same as us, which is about 65,000 of our 85,000 meters were out of power. And they this morning were down to about 4,000 of their accounts that were still out. So they're still working over the next couple of days, and we sent some help that we had over to help them as well. So it was definitely a mess.
So Melissa, tell us a little bit about your strategy before, during, and after the storm. And she and I were talking ahead of time. We don't have another storm potentially hitting us in the Gulf of Mexico. Just so you guys understand, my relationship is outside of New Orleans and Mandeville, Louisiana, and Lake Pontchartrain. So I'm about a 30-minute drive from Ron's office. So Melissa, we don't have our hurricane of the month scheduled till next Sunday. But
Right.
that said, what were some of your strategies before, during, and after with your communications?
Okay, and I'd just like to say too, thank you so much for having us, Jared, and it's a privilege to do this call. Ron and I, we've worked together, I guess I've been here since 2003, so 17 years, and we have a great relationship, so I'm very fortunate. I'll just say that before I get started in our plans. But we have a crisis binder. It includes every scenario you could possibly imagine for crisis situations, and that's all thanks to your help and the help of our other cooperatives that we partnered with. But one of the most important that we have to visit a lot, unfortunately, is a hurricane or storm threats. So obviously the very first thing we did, I'm losing track of time because it was over a week ago now, was pull out our storm binder, visit that plan, and activate our communication storm plan. So we began early on preparing messaging, starting our social media. We did an e-news. We had our storm page on the website activated. And we also set up a communication storm room this time where we brought in some assistance for social media because we knew this was going to be a big social media event. So those are some of the things we kind of did ahead of time. During the storm, most of the communications team stayed on site. So in our storm room, we were able to communicate with members even during the event. For the ones that hadn't lost power, they were still kind of asking us for updates. So we were able to keep them informed throughout the event as well. Post-storm, I guess something surprising this time for me was in the past when we worked storms, we did, a little bit of social media. And Katrina, obviously we didn't have any, but this time social media just blew out of the park. I could not believe how social media just completely overtook nearly all of our communications. And we were essentially, I guess, an extension of our call center. So that was something that I think we were prepared for, but I'm also drafting a new plan moving forward because I see some changes we could make there. But our goal is to try to respond to every single member, either by comment, by messenger. We want to have some kind of response with our members and assure them that we're working hard for them. So that was
if I can interrupt for a second, I think that's something important we probably all ought to touch on at a future class is social media, because it gets out of hand real fast and it does become a customer service issue.
It does. Yeah, fortunately, we had one of our member service reps assisting with our social media, and we were even going as far as she was putting in outage tickets for members, and again, essentially an extension of our call center, which in the past, again, that is not something we've had to do. I mean, we posted updates, we responded, but with our extreme call volume, some of our members, when it was taking longer to get through to our call center, they were turning to our social media channels and using our messengers almost as a chat because they knew someone was going to answer them quickly. So I guess that was a little bit different for us, because although we've had storms where we've used social media a lot, but this was with the amount of members that we had out, there was just a lot of social media happening with this, and we would like to have done more media and some of our other communications functions, but because of the social media, it just kind of tied us there a little bit.
Jared, I might add that you almost have to make a decision when you go into a storm where you're going to have a lot of outages or whatever it may be for the people on the call, whether it's a fire or a tornado or an ice storm, whatever it is that you're going to have a lot of people interested in and wanting information. You've really got to make a decision on the front end. Do you post and not answer comments, or do you try to answer all comments? I will tell you, it's exhausting to try to communicate with literally thousands of people that are trying to find out about their specific situation. We've always taken the approach that we want to give over and above customer service. So we've tried to do this. I think we'll revisit that strategy after this storm. I will tell you that the local investor-owned utility, Mississippi Power, it's part of the Southern Company, outstanding organization. They have never chosen to go the route of communicating directly to individuals on their social media channels. They post information, there are lots of comments, but they never respond. Yeah. So I think my only point is one may not be better than the other, but it's something you really have to decide ahead of time. And we decided, for pretty much every storm that we've had social media for, that we will talk to individuals and try to reassure them, find out what's going on with their situation. But it took a tremendous amount of resources to do that. And Melissa will take a good close look at that before we go into the next storm to say, okay, is this a path we want to continue to follow, or could the communications group be better utilized in a different way? And I'm not sure the answer to that yet.
Yeah, I've got some strong feelings on that, and I'm happy to get offline with you. But a couple of thoughts, because I was actually getting ready to create a blog post about this, because I was also without power for more than 48 hours, and our power company is horrible at all aspects of communications. And so I was watching what they were doing on Facebook, and the algorithms of Facebook are not built in the advantage of an electric company or anybody. There's a great show on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, and one of the best lines in that show is, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. Right. And I've got some really smart friends who study this all the time, and they always use with me the phrase, never build your house on rented land, and Facebook is rented land. So I would say a great strategy to look at is use your Facebook to send people to your newsroom on your website. So for all of you on the call, think of this. You have those great pre-written news releases, or if you've got Situation Hub, you're generating your news releases through Situation Hub. Build a robust news site on your website. And then when you do your social media post, you direct people off of Facebook and they go to the website to get accurate information that manages their expectations. Once they're off of Facebook, it's more of an effort for them to get back to Facebook. And as I was studying this with my own power company, a perfect example was a person said, well, I wasn't going to say anything, but now that I see everybody else commenting, and the way the algorithms are built in Facebook, the more people comment, the more it gives people an opportunity to comment. So I'll make that a whole different show. In the interest of time, let me move things on here. I'm glad you guys are recovered. You've done an amazing job. And as always, in the co-op world, you had lots of help and support from the region and around the country. So Ron, let's dig into you a little bit, because your relationship with communication started off as a communicator, and now you're the general manager. So what was your initial relationship with what was your initial relationship like with your general manager, and how did that influence what you and Melissa and April and the other members of the team now have?
Okay, great question, Jared. Thank you. Our former CEO hired me to be the vice president of marketing, communications, public relations for the company. So 25 years ago. He had the understanding, and he's an engineer, by the way. So he had the understanding of the need for a communications department and team, but he knew really nothing about how it should function. So I was very fortunate that I had a former CEO that was interested in communications, wanted to see it be successful, but basically gave me the keys to the kingdom to say, now you go figure out how to make it work. Okay. So I have to tell you that is, in my opinion, the best way to do it, because he gave me a seat at the table, at the C-suite table. He gave me the tools to do my job. And then he let me figure out what was the best way to get the message out. And I will tell you, there were times where he said, hey, I think we're missing opportunities. And so there was some education that I had to provide to him as well. I think that generally people that are not in communications think of it as, well, everybody communicates and anybody could do it. But to do it professionally and to do it well, takes some science, some skill, some passion. And so, I was fortunate to have a CEO that understood the importance of it, but really didn't know how to do it.
Now, you've always made crisis communications, I think, a real priority. So tell me, what was the influence for you on making that such a priority and being as proactive as you've been? Because you've, in my book, you're the kind of CEO I'd love to see cloned across America at 900 different places, with that emphasis on crisis communications. But what made you that way?
Well, thank you. Quite frankly, life experience. Also, Melissa and I are both, I would say, very organized and very planning related. We both are planners. We like to think about what not only are we doing now, but what's going to happen this year, next year, 5 years from now. So I started noticing that there were more and more of these situations that came up. You get a call in the middle of the night and it's your dispatch saying, hey, there's been an electrical contact, someone trying to steal power, and they need someone there to talk to the media. So the more I thought about that, the more I realized we needed something that would be prepared in advance, that would allow us to basically flip to the correct page in the book, have something pre-written that you could fill in the details, and you could do it quickly. One of the things I learned from you, Jared, more than anything else, is you have to be quick in your actions. Waiting 2 to 3 hours to respond, sometimes others will fill in the news the way they see it, as opposed to what the true facts are, or the way that you would like to tell them. So I guess the best way to say it is, it's in my nature, it's in Melissa's nature to think about strategic planning. But when I went to my boss, quite frankly, he was a little bit skeptical. He was like, well, that seems like, something that y'all have always handled well, and why do we need to spend money on that? But he did get it when, I said, look, this is really not that expensive to do. It's really more about putting the time and dedication into doing it. And when I bring him back, 2 huge binders where we tried to think of every scenario that you can think of that could happen, and you just flip to a specific page, I think you got it at that point.
Yeah. What would you say to other communicators who are on the line with us today and other GMs? Because, should I pay for it? Will I ever use it? Is always an issue. And I always say crisis communications is like an umbrella. You don't buy an umbrella because you're hoping it rains today. You spend the money on the darn thing in case your sunny day turns stormy. So what would be your advice for rationalizing an expenditure and knowing that you're spending this money with the hope that you actually never use this thing?
That's a great point, Jared. And I would say that whatever you spend, and it's, trust me, now that I sit in this seat, what we spend in communications is pennies compared to what we spend in engineering and other operations related disciplines within the company. All it takes is one bad crisis to ruin 50, 60, 70, 80 years worth of good reputation. You can't put a price on that. So that's really the argument that I went with, is that we will be better prepared, and we're not going to spend a lot of money on this, but we're going to invest in a good system that allows us to mitigate risks to the reputation of the company. And when it was sold that way, it suddenly became the realization that, you're right. One good, look, we look back from our college days of, and I'm showing my age here, but when the Tylenol scandal came out, some people took Tylenol, had been poisoned. I think some people may have died. The way Tylenol handled that at the time is a textbook in the right way to handle crisis communications. Yeah. And we all know of other cases where people didn't do it the right way and, quite frankly, never recovered.
Yeah.
So to me, whatever you spend in communications is well worth the time and effort if you can avert a major crisis to your reputation above all things.
So what is your advice if the CEO gets it, but then the CEO has to convince 8 to 10 members of a board to release that extra money? What advice do you share with the CEO to talk to the board? Is it essentially the same?
Well, I think you have to put it in terms that they understand. Ultimately, what we all as human beings care about is what's in it for me. We're selfish by nature. Even though we want to be unselfish and we want to be giving, we have to think about, well, how's it going to affect me? So the way that we approached our board of directors was to talk about exactly what I just said. If we have a crisis and we're not prepared, this is how it affects you as a board. Now, potentially, people are out saying, well, that board's not doing a good job running the co-op, so therefore maybe I'll run against that board member and take their seat. Yeah. So I'm always trying to put it back in terms of how does it benefit our membership first, but also how does it benefit you as either the manager or a board member to help you do your job easier as well.
Excellent. Melissa, let's let you weigh in on sort of the same topic, because I know you go to not CEO close up, you go to the Connect conference and some of the other events, and you go to state association meetings and things like that. And there always seems to be a blend of communicators who A, get it and want to plan, B, feel self-empowered and feel like they can wing it in the moment and do great work, and others for whom it just always seems to be an afterthought and seems like hope is their greater strategy instead of planning. So what do you think, Melissa?
Honestly, Jared, I don't know how I would sleep well at night not knowing we didn't have a crisis communications plan. And my team feels the same way. We definitely feel more prepared. I would say we feel prepared at all times. Even for the unknown to come our way, at least we have a plan in place and are prepared to respond to it. I can't imagine not having that in our back pocket and something to refer to for, there's no way that you can just react in the appropriate manner and be effective in your communications. It's so much better to have that plan in place and have your talking points prepared, and you're just going to work a lot more effectively, and you're going to be able to manage your reputation much better, and your members are going to trust and believe in you if you come out with a solid response and you're prepared for the crisis. So I can't imagine not having it.
Yeah, I love the way you put the emphasis on trust because, so often, um, I find there are some organizations who work hard to grow that trust every day, and other organizations that never build the trust up front, so they have nothing to bank on the back end. And trust is important. Let's transition with you now. Say some bad things about your boss because he's, no, I'm just kidding.
It's, it's okay.
Let's talk about
I'll step away if you need me to, Melissa.
employee reviews are not till next week. But let's talk about the relationship that you have with your GM and tell us about it and share some advice and wisdom for other GMs and other communicators and member service VPs who are on the call today and will be watching the replay.
Okay. Well, like I said at the beginning of the call, I'm incredibly blessed because I've worked for Ron for 17 years. He hired me basically out of college. So in all honesty, he's been my mentor, and his work ethic and the things he's taught me are just embedded in me. So I hope that's the way that I manage my team, and I hope that's the way my team sees me. But he's a solid communicator, so he's taught me numerous things. And I'm again very lucky because he did become our CEO, and so there's not many things that I have to tell him are important in my role because he already knows the importance and the value of it. He gives me every tool that I need to do my job. Any trainings that I ask for, he encourages me to do them. He lets me structure my department the way I need it to be. He values my position and the seat that I sit at the table equally with our CFO, our engineer. He trusts me and I trust him. And again, I feel very fortunate because I know that is definitely not the case in a lot of places. But the trust level that we have and the fact that he lets me bring those suggestions and ideas, and he tells me all the time, I have lots of ideas and I can't do them all, but he listens and he tells me, bring me solutions, or don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. So I know that I could quote many things that he said to me over the years, but again, just having that easy relationship I can text him and ask him anything. I can pick up the phone and he's not gonna push my call away like it's not important. And I'm not just bragging on him because we're on this together. I mean it. Anybody that knows us, I know Ron Stewart knows both of us and the relationship we have. But it is great because he understands. He's been in this seat and he knows. So I am very lucky.
So we were saying that Facebook is at the speed of instant, and Twitter is at the speed of instant, and we perpetually see organizations that do not have a library of pre-written news releases, or they don't have an automated system like Situation Hub, and they're staring at a blank computer screen and they write for 45 minutes. And no matter how good of a Pulitzer Prize winning writer you are, you take that well-written news release on a piece of paper into the boardroom or to the CEO's office, and it gets torn to shreds, and you go back for draft 2 and draft 3, and 3 hours pass, which in my world is completely unacceptable. Ron, if you and Melissa would weigh in on your relationship of the approval process, and how much autonomy does Melissa have to create something and send it out to the world versus some organizations that are deeply embedded with micromanagement by either a CEO or a general counsel or a board of directors?
Yeah, Jared, I think it really depends on what it is. If it's a crisis situation, Melissa knows that she's got full authority to address quickly the situation, whether it be the public, membership. A little bit of a unique situation because Melissa has told you that I hired her, I trained her, I fully trust her. I put her on my executive team when I stepped up. So I know that she's not going to say something that's going to embarrass the company. When there is time, then certainly I would prefer to look at things that are going to go out to the membership or the public simply to make sure there's been a second set of eyes on it. I always like to do that when I was in her role, is just have someone else have a second set of eyes on it. But I do trust her, and she knows that if she needs to make a decision quickly, she has the authority to do that. You've got to be able to treat your communications team the same way you would your engineering or your operations team. Very seldom did I ever see the CEO ask the engineer or the operations team anything about getting a pole back on quickly after, let's say, a car had hit a pole. So why should it be any different when you are communicating, especially if you've done your homework ahead of time? I will say again, one of my famous sayings is make hay while the sun's shining. So don't wait until a crisis situation to try to figure out what you're going to say. If you've got a good set of crisis communications already written, then it's going to make whatever that crisis is seem much less scary to be able to say, okay, these are already pre-approved. Now all I have to do is fill in the blanks with the details and put it out there to the public.
I love your analogy and your comparison to the lineman, because I've tried to make that point a few times in my life. You don't make that lineman, you trust that the lineman is trained.
That's right.
And that they don't have to ask to remove a transformer and put a new one up.
That's right.
Melissa, what are your thoughts regarding autonomy versus micromanagement?
I would say the same, basically echo what Ron said. He definitely is not a micromanager. He gives me full authority, to run my department and to make decisions on my own. Because he does have a communications background, at times I may go to him over certain things, and let him look over or get his advice on certain things because he has that background. But like Ron said, we have this great crisis plan, and it's been reviewed by, he's reviewed it. He was, in this department, so he was part of creating it. But as we make changes and update every year, he's included in that process and knows, to a certain extent, he's the CEO. It's not his job anymore to have to do that, but he's aware and knows what's going to be communicated in the event a crisis occurs. And we have all that pre-planned, and there's no trying to decide that at the time. So he knows exactly what's going to be said. And I think he can rest assured, knowing that we're going to say the right things. And we're planned, we've planned and prepared for things like that.
Yeah. It's one tidbit of a side note here is Ron helped organize, when I worked with him and Baldwin and Chelco, to write their crisis communications plans. We got together in 2 days and we did a retreat. And Ron is now a GM, went from PR to GM. Oh. Karen Moore at Baldwin was there that day, went from communicator to general manager. And Aaron Bradshaw is now in his second job in Missouri, going from communicator to GM. So for those of you who are communicators on the call, there's definitely a pathway there for you to be GM. So Melissa, you could be next.
Oh.
Well, Jaret, I think the commonality between the three of us was that we were all very strategic thinkers, and we all were looking out to the future. And I think that's what anyone wants to run their organization, is someone that's never satisfied with today and is always looking about how we can improve for tomorrow.
Oh, that's an awesome observation. That really is. It's always looking for that degree of perfection, and how do we do better, and how do we not get caught in a jam?
Yeah, my philosophy is you can be fantastic today, but if you stay at that level, someone will pass you up. You always have to be striving to do better, to do more, to be better. And ultimately, we put everything around service to our members. Ultimately, I always remind people at the end of the day, if you're not doing something in service of our members, then you're doing the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. So if you will put your focus on service to members, you will want to be a great communicator because you will care about them hearing what you have to say.
That's an awesome point. There was a cooperative that I had worked with, and much like you, I helped them build their crisis communications plan and all their pre-written news releases. And it was rather interesting because the GM at this particular cooperative never bought into it. And he is now infamous because I think he may have eventually gone to jail. But they got into a situation of governance issues. He was using co-op equipment to put post holes. He was using the augers in the back of the trucks to put up post holes on his ranch. And a member called him out on it, and he never would capitulate or admit that he shouldn't have done that. And his board backed him up. Eventually, all 10 members of the board got voted off. He got fired, and I think probably ended up doing a little bit of jail time. What are your thoughts when it comes to governance, when it comes to what I would, I guess the way I was raised, that was called being hard-headed, when you won't listen to anybody. And regardless of how many times I phoned this person knowing they were in trouble, they never returned my phone call. Regardless of how many times I reached out to the board, they never replied. And even the successors never followed up. What are your thoughts on governance and mindset with stuff like that?
Well, if you do the right thing, you can sleep good at night.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. Number two, you should be transparent, especially those of us that work in cooperatives. We're owned by those we serve. So that our members deserve to have people be straight with them. Also, as Americans, I've always found that Americans will forgive you for just about anything, except not taking responsibility when you know you're wrong and when you've been caught. So you see politicians get into this trouble all the time where they get in trouble and then they dig themselves a deeper hole and then they get kicked out. Yeah. As opposed to those that get in trouble and say, look, I'm human, I made a mistake, I ask your forgiveness and I won't do it again. Yeah. And then they usually get off. So in terms of governance, I believe that you have to be transparent. And I believe that you have to operate with the highest integrity and ethical measures so that you don't have to worry when someone calls knocking on the door that you've done anything wrong. Mm-hmm. It just helps me to enjoy life, enjoy the job that I have, knowing that anybody can ask me anything. There's nothing I'm afraid to tell them because I believe in that we're doing all the right things here.
Speaking of anybody asking anything, those of you who are on the call, does anybody have a question that you want to ask? You can either pose it down in the chat space down below here, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like. Let's go through the list here. I see Erica. Do you have anything you want to ask? And Mark Sellers. Mark is over there at Peace River. That hurricane could bump into you. Nolan, do you and Tom have anything that you want to add or ask?
Nope, we're good, Jared.
All right. Let's see. Ron, do you have anything from the Jackson office that you want to ask? He shows up.
I really don't have anything to ask, but one thing that I think has been mentioned by both Melissa and Ron is that communicators do need a seat at the table. So often they're asked to do things and they're not kept up to date on what's actually going on. So by having that seat at the table, I think that helps them really do their job in a manner where they don't always have to go to the CEO or get him involved or her involved. So I think that's one of the most important things is to let them be aware of what's going on so that they don't have to be blindsided.
And you've also, I should say, you've done a good job at the state level of making it a priority. I know I've worked with you on a couple of workshops that you hosted for your communicators from around the state. Give us a little background on how you see crisis communications and how you've come to place value on that, and what conversations you had with your own members at a statewide basis.
Well, I would echo a lot of what Ron and Melissa has said. One of the key things I think that a CEO needs to remember is providing the resources, giving them training, even though they've been through college and have a degree in communications or whatever it might be. They still need training throughout their career and staying abreast of what's going on, because if you see me on the screen, you know, I'm a little bit on the older age, and talking about social media, 20 years ago, that wasn't anything that you would have to worry about. It was more of being in front of a newspaper reporter that had a pad and a pencil and taking notes, or occasionally a TV camera. But, now with social media, that's, if you have not been trained and provided the resources, that makes it hard for a communicator to stay up on what's going on. So, I think that's one of the importance of what we do at statewide, is trying to have appropriate training throughout the years to keep everyone up to date, and have the actual resources, and plus being able to share. When you come to these meetings, just like you're doing today, you share a lot of information, real live situations. I know Ron and Melissa, the next time, hopefully it won't be long, we'll be able to get back together and meet. I'm sure that one of them will be on the program to talk about the do's and the don'ts and what you learned from these experiences. And that helps the other co-op communicators not to have to live through one of those situations to understand it. So they've brought up some really good points. But the other one is, I agree with what Melissa said, being prepared. You can't wait till the storm hits and then start trying to do it. You've got to have it done way ahead of time.
Yeah, I think with weather events, a huge part for me is doing as much communications as possible before the event, and really managing the expectations of people. And because I also live in a hurricane zone, I'm very sensitive about it. I evacuated with my family a week ago for Hurricane Zeta. Yeah, I can't remember which one it was. I've had 7 this year, but I evacuated for creature comforts. I wasn't afraid of the flooding that I get in the yard because I live right on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain. So 4 to 6 feet of water in my yard is a possibility. My house is on stilts, like many waterfront properties are. So I'm safe there. I know it's nerve-wracking if the siding comes off the house, or if roofing starts blowing off. So creature comforts, I would say, for everybody in this call, is a great motivator, that in your early messaging, that you really drive home the idea that, this storm may not kill you, but it will make your life miserable. If you need electricity, if that is important to you, there is usually safety 30 to 45 minutes away from wherever you are. Of course, a winter storm is going to cover a much broader path, and some hurricanes are much bigger than this one. But in this case, I literally drove an hour to Baton Rouge, which is the closest I've ever gone for hurricane, because I knew this one was so small. So yeah, a lot of the management of expectations, I think, is a big part. Ron, Melissa, what else? Any other final thoughts you want to share here before we wrap up today?
I was just going to add one thought to what you just said with storm preparation and pre-storm messaging. We do exactly what you just said, and we create an archive of social media posts, the e-newsletters, our web page with storm information, and we have all of those scenarios for pre-storm, I guess, as far as generator safety. If you have special needs, you're on oxygen, whatever the messaging may be, we have an archive built with social media posts ready for pre, during, and post-storm. That way, we're just pulling, as part of our crisis plan, all of those pieces. That goes back to what this whole discussion has been about. We're not trying to write those while we're frantic, responding, to members on Facebook. I won't say frantic, because we were never frantic. We were very calm. But we're just prepared. We have what we need. We've already created it on a sunny day in our conference room. We've thought through everything a member could possibly ask. And preparation definitely makes a crisis 1,000 times better. It's never perfect, but it definitely makes your life a lot easier and your job a lot smoother, and your members' belief in you and their trust in you a lot better.
I would just add on to what Melissa said in terms of preparation just makes everything, whatever the situation. I don't know who's on the call, but there may be people that deal with all kinds of different crises. Being prepared ahead of time is always going to make you much calmer. And calm is a good thing when you're communicating. When you're able to, have thought these things through on the front end, it's going to make you better at what you have to communicate on the back end.
How much, we were talking a little bit about the crazy videos I sometimes shoot in my front yard when I'm flooding during hurricanes. How much are you guys using cell phones to generate fresh content for videos for YouTube or for your Facebook Live? Do you do any of that stuff at all?
We do a lot. Um, we do a good percentage, I'd say, through our cell phones. We use Canva a lot, some different apps to create content, and it's been very helpful. It's a good part of our communications overall now, is using our cell phones a lot more. I think when we used to carry around our gigantic cameras, and we still do that at times. We did use it one time this past storm, but the majority of time we're using our phones because they can take the same quality of pictures, that those big cameras we carry around can do. So definitely, Jared, that's something we use a ton as part of our communications overall.
Jared, I would add that even though I don't like it, the communications team has convinced me, and I've gone along with as many times as you've got something that you can put the CEO on and usually it's just a cell phone video.
Yeah.
You post that out to your website, your YouTube page, Facebook. It adds a lot of credibility to whatever the message you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
So they continually stick that camera in my face, and even though I really don't like to be on it, even as a communicator, it was never my favorite part of the job. I understand that people like to hear from the boss when they can.
Well, one of the things I would say to that point, Ron, is something we've discussed before, but it's the idea that the written word is black and white and can be misinterpreted. So often a person will send an email out, and the receptor of the email, the person receiving the email, perceives it 180 degrees differently than what the sender intended, because there is a tone. So then if we go to radio and we can add voice, then the voice allows us to convey verbal empathy or verbal excitement, whatever it happens to be. Then we add the third element, which is the human face on a video, or whether the human face is on the video or you're showing your lineman working. It's now getting words to people with emotion and a degree of empathy or happiness or excitement, whatever that is, on the face as well as in the voice. So good for you, Melissa, for making Ron get on camera. And I just think that something that everybody in this call should really focus on is practicing and taking this little phone out and practicing the selfie video. It was interesting because I didn't know they were called selfies when I first started doing it. I had a daughter in college back at the early days of social media who says, "Dad, those are called selfies." And I went, okay, that's a stupid name, but I'll go with that if that's what everybody's calling it. And at a lot of the Connect conferences where I've spoken, we would do an exercise where I would take everybody out and ask everybody to shoot a 38-second video. It had to be 38 seconds or shorter, because if you want to text message the video to someone, it can't be too large of a video. It's got to be 32 to 36 seconds. And the struggle that people had just to say their name, much less give a who, what, when, where, why, and how, and do it in 32 to 36 seconds, it was just a great strain on that. So I would say definitely everybody on this call needs to practice that skill set of creating your own videos. On my blog at Brew Communications, BRAUD Communications, Shannon, you can probably help me remember, we did like 23 episodes on how to do videos. Back then, CNN had something called iReporter. So if you do Jaret Brew, Gerard Brew, plus video, plus iReporter, it might come up. I'll send you guys a follow-up email and I'll try to find that. But that's definitely a skill set that you need to learn.
I was going to add one more comment, Jared, to your speaking of cell phones. I know we are definitely appreciative, and this is kind of a plug for your Situation Hub, but that we now have the ability through Situation Hub to be able to access those files electronically from our cell phone. As Ron mentioned earlier in the call, we've carried around those big binders for years, and I still have them because I'm a paper person. I still work out of a paper planner along with my electronic calendar. But it is very convenient to have Situation Hub on our phones and to be able to customize those templates and have everything accessible electronically, and digitally right there from our phones. So I appreciate you developing that tool for us.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Situation Hub is actually an idea that I came up with back in around 2004, 2005. And I think Ron, we may have written your plan around 2006. But I had invented the idea in my head. How can I automate the process of writing news releases with software? But we simply didn't have enough connectivity. And 4 years ago, I realized connectivity is where it is. And that's when I hired a software team and said, okay, if we ask a person these questions about this crisis and they choose these answers, can we make it write a news release? And that's certainly when I've tested it, from the beginning of a crisis to the time the news release is written, is anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. I don't think there's any news release, even for the most horrible event like a workplace shooting with mass casualties, that takes more than 10 minutes to generate a news release. So I'm glad you're able to get to that on your phone, because the binder that we created, that system still works, but that's 700 pages. So for comparison, that's a ream and a half of paper. So when you go to Office Depot or you go to your storeroom and grab a ream of paper, you realize that's heavy. And if you're carrying 1.5 of those, that's even heavier. So yeah, I'm really excited that we can move everything to the phone, to the laptop, to the iPad, and all of that type of stuff. Well, I am most appreciative of you guys being able to join us here. A gentleman by the name of Bo probably had different time zones. So Bo, you were just coming in at the end of the program. I'm going to share the screen, Bo. I'm going to make sure that you and everybody else get a replay for it. So as we wrap up, Ron and Melissa, look, you guys have been working 18 hours a day. I am just eternally grateful that you were still able to make this call after spending 18 hours a day trying to recover from Hurricane Zeta. If you have any questions that you want to ask after the call is over, I have a Calendly link there, which is the application that lets you say, hey, I need to ask a couple of confidential questions. Can I use that? So use that link. As a thank you gift for being on the call, if you would like a subscription to Situation Hub, you can take the tour at situationhub.com, and I will give you the Pro plan, which is usually $299 a month, for the cost of the basic plan, which is $99. And that gives you more than 75 pre-written news releases. It lets you have 12 seats, and it's unlimited use of Situation Hub. So we're certainly thankful that you are here, and you're just all wonderful for being great PR people. You're all wonderful for being great communicators. I am just most grateful that you're making career growth an important part of what you do. So thanks for being here today, everybody. And Ron and Melissa, again, thank you so much for making time in your schedule to do this. I have one thing on chat. Oh, that's Mark Zeller saying bye, everybody. So thanks, everybody, for your time today.
Thank you, Jared. It's our pleasure.